what's that? I said, it's likely to be Parmenides. So we had fun that night. But what the important point of it is, though, you see, he was moving from this to this. And now he always has a loyalty, even though he talks about science. He also has a loyalty to Chinese thought. And when he talks about Chinese thought, he slips into a Buddhism, because his Chinese thought moves into Taoism, and the Taoism that he's interested in most often picks up terms like being and non-being, and that's where he moves. Now, what does he do, therefore, to bring this together, to try to answer this question about the taboo against knowing the self? Well, the self that he introduces in this very fine book called The Taboo Against Knowing Yourself. And I'd like to read you a couple of lines out of it because it's so interesting the way he expresses it. I'm on the book, subtitled The Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. We need a slightly shift in viewpoint, he says. And nothing is more obvious, this is his jumping off point, there's nothing more obvious than the interdependence of opposites. The interdependence of opposites. Now wait a minute. On and off were opposites. Self and other were opposites. Being and non-being were opposites. You say, wait a minute, there's an interdependence between these. They're correlated, they're correlatives, they're correlated. They're not opposites opposing one another, as if they are forces divided against one another and at war with one another. He says, no. So what does he do with it? Is it possible that myself, my existence, the self, so contains being and nothing that death is merely the off interval in an on and off pulsation, which must be eternal, on and off, on and off. That's this, on and off, on and off. Because every alternative to this pulsation would in due course imply its presence. Is it conceivable then that I am basically an eternal existence, momentarily and perhaps needlessly terrified by one half of itself because it has identified all of itself with the other half? Have I identified myself with just one half of this? On, self, I, being? You say, hey, that's the problem. I have identified one half of terms which are interdependent. If I'm going to change my view, he said, you know what? He said, I'd have to revert to the myth of the ego as an isolated, independent observer from whom the rest of the world is absolutely other and nothing. But neither neurology nor biology nor sociology can subscribe to this, his allegiance to modern science, which he always does. Okay, now watch the way he pulls it together in just a couple of sentences. If, on the other hand, self and other, subject and object, organism and environment are the poles of a single process, then that is my true existence. That, together, that is my true existence. All of these, right? Because they are not opposed to one another, there's an interdependence between them. What am I? I am that which includes them both. And he capitalizes the word that. self and other, subject and object, poles of a single process. That is my true existence. Then he quotes the Upanishads. That is the self. That is the real. That art thou. But I cannot think or say anything about that. Or as I shall now call it. Now he moves from the word that to it. It's not a that, it's an it. Capital I, it's an it. Unless I resort to the convention of using dualistic language and metaphors and analogies, as he says. What lies beyond opposites must be discussed. In terms of opposites? And that means using the language of analogy, metaphor, and myth. Okay, 2 more sentences and I'll take a pause. The difficulty is not only that language is dualistic insofar as words are labels for mutually exclusive classes. The problem is that it is so much more myself than I thought I was. So central and so basic to my existence that I cannot make it an object. There is no way to stand outside it, and in fact, no need to do so. For as long as I am trying to grasp it, I am implying that it is not really myself. This is why those who really know that they are it invariably say they don't understand it. Okay? For it understands understanding. For it understands understanding. That's the it. Because he just went through a process where he discovers and shares with us what he calls the self. He brings us to understand what it is, takes us through a process of understanding. He says, you know what? That's it. It understands. And this is the understanding that it understands. And the it is that. That's it. That's what he does. So how does he end the book? He ends up the book in a great way. I don't know anyone who can do this as well as he does. He's a totally amazing guy. He ends his book with a Joyce Broughton little poem. This is it, and I am it, and you are it, and so is that, and he is it, and she is it, and it is it, and that's that. That's where he ends his book. So that's that, and so he ends it that way. Right? And so, he's quite a, obviously, as everybody knows, he's so creative. He can take an idea and he plays with it and he turns it around and he uses all these different traditions as if they were particular paint colors, and he then dabs around and does his little mosaic and he presents it to us and says, that's what I think today. Don't worry about it, he'll change it tomorrow. Right? A part of it, but he'll keep a certain part of it, he'll maintain. So this was quite, as I remember, this was in the 60s that he did this. And let me just make sure, 65 I think, 66.